My name is Avery Sterling. I'm 31, and last night my father called my business card a cheap fake from Staples in front of his biggest client. He laughed, telling the table I was delusional for pretending to be an executive. What he didn't know? I'm the CTO of the billion-dollar tech giant that pays 20% of his firm's bills. He thought I was just a computer girl failing at life, but I'm actually the woman who's about to bankrupt him. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. In the hyper-manicured suburbs of Scottsdale, Arizona, status isn't just a vibe, it's a currency. Here, the heat is dry, the lawns are unnaturally green, and the Sterling family name was supposed to be synonymous with the old guard. My father, Harrison Sterling, 58, is a man who measures a person's soul by the thread count of their Italian suit and the prestige of their JD. It was a Sunday evening in late 2024. The sun was dipping behind the Camelback Mountain, casting long golden shadows across our limestone patio. Inside, the air conditioning hummed at a crisp 68 degrees, smelling faintly of expensive sandalwood and the $400 Wagyu ribeye resting on the counter. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my fingers hovering over my phone. I wasn't scrolling through TikTok. I was monitoring a 0-day vulnerability report on a secure server in Frankfurt. My brain was half submerged in lines of Python and C++, while the other half was trying to survive the suffocating family summit. Avery, for the love of God, put that gadget away. Harrison's voice cut through the room like a gavel hitting a bench. He didn't look at me. He was busy decanting a 2015 Cabernet, his movements precise and theatrical. We are having a family discussion about Julian's fellowship, Harrison continued, his tone dripping with that practiced courtroom authority. The Sterling legacy is built on presence, Avery, not whatever doom scrolling you're doing. My brother, Julian, 34, adjusted his designer scrubs. He had just finished a 14-hour shift at Mayo Clinic and looked every bit the golden boy the family worshipped. It's fine, Dad. Avy's probably just checking her coding blog or whatever. Not everyone can handle the pressure of open heart surgery. It's not a blog, Julian, I said, my voice flat. It's a security patch for a global infrastructure. Julian smirked, sharing a look with our sister Chloe, 28. Chloe was a lifestyle influencer who spent her days taking thirst traps at Pilates and her nights spending her husband Grant's bonuses. Oh my God, Ave, stop trying to make it sound so extra, Chloe giggled, swirling her wine. You're literally a mid-IT girl. Grant says the tech bubble is cooked anyway. Like, for real. He's a director at an investment bank. He actually knows how the economy works. You just fix Wi-Fi, right? I don't fix Wi-Fi, Chloe, I muttered, but the words fell on deaf ears. This was the Sterling operating system. If you weren't a lawyer, a doctor, or married to a high-level executive, you were a glitch. I flashed back to May 2017. I was standing on the stage at MIT, the humid Massachusetts air clinging to my graduation gown. I had a 4.0 GPA, 2 published papers on neural network encryption, and 3 job offers before I even turned my tassel. Harrison didn't show up. He sent a text. Stuck in a high-stakes deposition for a Fortune 500 client. Legacy matters, Avery. Hope you enjoyed your little ceremony. Don't forget to send me your resume so I can help you find a real assistant job at the firm. My mother, Eleanor, had come, but she spent the whole time on her phone, complaining that the Boston weather was ruining her blowout. When we went to dinner, she spent 2 hours talking about how Julian had just bought his first Porsche. She didn't ask once about my thesis. That was the day I stopped trying. I decided then that if they wanted me to be invisible, I would be a ghost. But I would be a ghost that haunted their entire financial ecosystem. In 2018, I co-founded Aegis Shield. To keep my father from interfering or claiming credit for my success, I legally used my grandmother's maiden name for the all-professional filings, Avery Vance. By 2022, Avery Vance was a titan. I was the silent architect. Aegis Shield grew from a 3-person startup in a garage to a cybersecurity powerhouse with 140 engineers across 3 continents. We didn't just build apps. We built the digital fortresses that kept national power grids and central banks from being hacked by foreign states. But at home, I was just Avery, the daughter who did something with computers. Anyway, Harrison said, reclaiming center stage, I invited James Sullivan to Avery's 31st birthday dinner next month, the Ocean Club, 7 p.m. sharp. James Sullivan, the senior partner at Sterling & Vance, the man who had been my father's idol and boss for 2 decades. Avery. Harrison looked at me now, his eyes narrowing. James is a man of substance. He doesn't care about tech bro slang or whatever girl boss nonsense you're into. Do me a favor, don't talk. Just sit there, wear that black dress your mother bought you, and let Julian and Grant handle the conversation. James likes high-value people. I don't want him thinking my youngest daughter is a delusional freelancer. I'm not a freelancer, Dad, I said, my pulse thrumming in my ears. I have a seat on the board of a board? Of what? A book club? Harrison laughed, and the rest of the table joined in. Honey, coordinating computer projects is noble, but let's not pretend it's C-suite work. You're a project coordinator at best. Stay in your lane. Grant, Chloe's husband, chimed in, leaning forward with a patronizing grin. Yo, Ave, don't take it hard. Not everyone is built for the big leagues. It's okay to be mid. Someone's got to do the grunt work while we handle the mergers. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. It was the same feeling I got when I found a bug in a million lines of code. I didn't get angry. I collected data. Data point 1. My family didn't respect me because they didn't know my bank balance. Data point 2. My father's firm was struggling. I knew because Aegis Shield's internal audit showed Sterling & Vance had been slow on their last 3 IP filings. Data point 3. They were about to walk into a trap of their own making. Copy that, Dad, I said, my voice like silk. I'll stay in my lane. After dinner, I drove my modest electric car back to my penthouse in North Scottsdale. They thought I was renting a studio apartment in a shady part of town. In reality, I owned the top 2 floors of the most exclusive high-rise in the city. A $3 million sanctuary bought with the equity Harrison thought was worthless. I sat in my dark office, the blue light from my 3 monitors reflecting in my eyes. I dialed a secure line. Margaret, I said. Avery, it's 10 p.m. Everything okay? Margaret Chin, our general counsel, sounded alert. I just reviewed our Q3 legal spend, I said, spinning my chair to look at the Phoenix skyline. We're paying Sterling & Vance $840,000 a year in retainers, right? Correct. They handle our regional compliance and some patent work in Arizona. James Sullivan is our point of contact. Why? I want a full, deep dive ethical risk audit on the firm, I said, starting with their senior leadership. I've noticed a lack of attention to detail in their recent communications. If their leadership can't accurately assess reality, they're a liability to Aegis Shield. You want to sunset them? Margaret asked, surprised. James has been a reliable shill for us for 18 months. I don't care about James, I said. I care about the data. And the data says they've grown complacent. They think they're untouchable. Let's see how they handle a 0-day event on their own doorstep. I hung up. I looked at my birthday invitation on the screen. November 2025, Morton's Steakhouse. Harrison wanted a family photo op. He wanted to show off his successful children to his senior partner. He wanted me to be the contrast that made Julian look like a god. He had spent 12 years telling me I was nothing. He had spent 12 years dismissing my promotions, my patents, and my sweat. He didn't know that the Staples business card he was about to laugh at was the only thing standing between his firm and total liquidation. I leaned back, a small, dangerous smile playing on my lips. Game on, Dad, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see who's really delusional. Monday morning in Scottsdale didn't start with a family breakfast. It started with a cold brew, 3 encrypted monitors, and a global security briefing. My penthouse office overlooked the McDowell Mountains, while my sister Chloe was likely posting a morning matcha story to her 50,000 followers. I was looking at a heat map of attempted cyber attacks on the U.S. power grid. My phone buzzed. It was Margaret Chin, the general counsel of Aegis Shield. Avery, I've started the ethical risk audit on Sterling & Vance as you requested. Margaret's voice was crisp. And honestly, it's a mess. They've been coasting on their reputation for a decade. Their internal data security is boomer tier, basically a screen door in a hurricane. And their financials? I asked, leaning back in my Herman Miller chair. That's the kicker. They've lost 4 major clients in the last 2 quarters. If they lose Aegis Shield, they won't just be struggling. They'll be filing for Chapter 11 by Christmas. Your father, Harrison, has been cooking the books a bit, moving retainer fees from one account to cover the overhead of another. It's a classic robbing Peter to pay Paul scenario. I closed my eyes for a second. My father, the man of legacy and prestige, was running a glorified Ponzi scheme to keep his Mercedes S-Class and his country club membership. Keep digging, Margaret, I said. I want a full report by the night of the birthday dinner. Oh, and one more thing. Look into my brother Julian's recent medical malpractice insurance premiums. Something felt off at dinner last night. You got it, boss. Stay locked in. I headed to the Aegis Shield headquarters, a glass fortress in the heart of the Scottsdale Tech Corridor. When I walked through the lobby, the atmosphere changed. Here, I wasn't the ghost, I was the sun. Morning, Miss Vance? The head of security nodded, his posture straightening. Morning, Marcus. Did we neutralize that Frankfurt ping? Yes, ma'am. Engineering is waiting for you in the war room. I spent the next 6 hours in high-stakes technical reviews. I managed a department of 140 engineers. I made decisions that affected millions of dollars in infrastructure. In this world, my voice was law. I didn't have to ask for respect. I had earned it with every line of code that held the line against chaos. Around 2 p.m., my personal phone rang. It was my mother, Eleanor. Avery, honey, she sighed into the phone. I'm at the boutique. I'm looking at this lovely beige dress for your birthday. It's very subdued. You know your father likes you to look approachable when James is around. I already have a dress, Mom. It's black, it's professional. Black? Oh, Avery, you're not going to a funeral. You're 31. You should be wearing something that says, I'm looking for a husband, not I'm about to fix a printer. I gripped the edge of my desk. Mom, I'm in the middle of a strategic board meeting. I have to go. A board meeting? For that little tech project of yours? Avery, stop being so extra. Just tell your boss you need a personal break. It's not like the world stops if a few computers go down. Actually, Mom, it kind of does. I'll see you in November. I hung up before she could hit me with another backhanded compliment. It was a certified bruh moment, as the Gen Z interns in the lobby would say. The weeks leading up to the dinner were a whirlwind of data collection, and what I found was straight up wild. Harrison wasn't just struggling, he was desperate. He had leveraged the family home to buy into a real estate fund that turned out to be a scam. He was banking everything on James Sullivan promoting him to equity partner this year, and the only reason James was even considering it? Because of the $840,000 annual retainer from Aegis Shield. Harrison was literally being fed by the daughter he despised, and he didn't have a clue. Then came the report on Julian, my perfect brother, the surgeon. Julian hadn't been working late at Mayo Clinic. He had been on administrative leave. 6 months ago, he had performed a routine gallbladder surgery while under the influence of prescription stimulants. He'd nicked an artery. The hospital had hushed it up with a massive settlement, but Julian's career was cooked. He was currently quiet quitting life, spending his days in a high-end rehab masquerading as a wellness retreat in Sedona. The Sterling family was a house of cards, and they were all looking at me like I was the trash on the floor. A week before the dinner, I was at a Forbes 30 Under 30 photo shoot. The photographer was directing me to look powerful, yet inaccessible. That's it, Ms. Vance. He snapped the shutter. The world needs to see the face of the woman who's reshaping global security. I looked at the preview on his tablet. I didn't see Avery Vance. I saw the girl who used to hide in the MIT library because it was the only place where people didn't laugh at her for being too smart. I saw the woman who had spent 12 years being told she was mid by people who couldn't even set up their own Netflix accounts. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Chloe. Hey, Ave, Grant says you should bring a +1 to dinner. He has a buddy who's a junior analyst at the bank. He's a bit of a nerd too, so you guys will have plenty to talk about. Don't worry, he's nice, even if he's not successful yet. I didn't reply. I just sent the photo from the Forbes shoot to my marketing director with one instruction. Release the Avery Vance, the Face of Aegis article on November 25th, 8 p.m. sharp. The night of the dinner arrived. Morton's Steakhouse was the epitome of Scottsdale old money. Dark wood, white tablecloths, and the smell of expensive cigars. I arrived 5 minutes late. I was wearing a black silk dress that cost more than Chloe's car, but under the dim lights of the restaurant, it looked simple enough to keep my father happy. My hair was pulled back into a sleek professional bun. In my clutch, I had 5 business cards. Avery Sterling, Chief Technology Officer, Aegis Shield. I walked toward the private booth at the back. Harrison was already there, looking sharp in his charcoal suit, laughing with James Sullivan. James was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a sharp gaze. Eleanor was next to him, looking snatched in her beige dress, her face frozen in a Botoxed smile. Julian was there, looking pale and shaky, and Chloe was busy taking a boomerang of her martini. "Avery, you made it," Eleanor chirped, though her eyes immediately went to my lack of jewelry. "So, minimalist." "Happy birthday, mija," Harrison said, his voice loud so James could hear. "James, you remember my youngest? Avery. She's our creative one, still working in tech. You know how it is, James. These startups keep them busy with ping pong tables and free snacks while the rest of us do the real work." James Sullivan stood up, extending a hand. He looked at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "Happy birthday, Avery. Your face. It looks very familiar." "Does it?" I said, shaking his hand firmly. "Maybe I just have one of those tech faces." Harrison laughed, a booming, dismissive sound. "Nonsense. James, you probably saw her in a Best Buy commercial. Anyway, sit down, Avery. James was just telling us about the Aegis Shield account. It's the crown jewel of our firm right now." "It's an impressive operation," James said, sitting back down. "The CTO over there, a woman named Avery Vance, is a beast in the boardroom. She's turned down 3 acquisition offers from Google this year alone. She's a real one, as my son would say." "And Vance, huh?" Chloe chimed in, scrolling through her phone. "Probably some pick-me girl who got lucky. I bet she's miserable in real life." "On the contrary," James said, "she's brilliant. I've only spoken to her on conference calls. She's very private, but she has this way of, she knows her worth. I'm hoping to finally meet her in person next week." "Well," Harrison said, lifting his glass of $200 scotch to Aegis Shield, "may they keep paying our bills so I can finally retire and spend more time at the club." "To the cash cow," Grant added, clinking his glass. I took a sip of my water. "Is that all a client is to you, Dad? A cash cow?" The table went silent. Harrison's smile didn't fade, but it turned icy. "Avery, don't be dense. It's a business term. You wouldn't understand high-level strategy. Just enjoy your steak. It costs more than your monthly internet bill, I'm sure." "Actually, Dad," I said, my voice calm, "I think I understand strategy perfectly. For example, I understand that if Aegis Shield found out their legal firm was mishandling funds to cover a partner's bad real estate bets, they'd cancel that contract in a heartbeat. That's just basic risk management, right?" Harrison's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His face went from tan to ashen in 3 seconds. James Sullivan narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say, Avery?" "Oh, ignore her!" Eleanor fluttered her hands, her voice shrill. "She's just talking to feel important. Avery, honey, why don't you tell James about that little app you're building? The one for coding?" "It's not an app, Mom," I said, reaching into my clutch. "It's a legacy." I pulled out my credit card to pay for the first round of drinks, a flex I'd been waiting for, and accidentally let my business card slide out onto the white tablecloth. It landed right in front of my father. Harrison squinted at it. He picked it up with 2 fingers as if it were a dirty napkin. "Avery Sterling, Chief Technology Officer, Aegis Shield," he read the words aloud. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't a small laugh. It was a belly-aching, a tears in his eyes roar of pure, condescending joy. "Oh, James, look at this." Harrison held the card up, waving it around. "My daughter, she literally made fake business cards to impress you. Avery, honey, Aegis Shield, our biggest client. You can't just cosplay as an executive because you want attention. This is straight up embarrassing. This is identity fraud, actually." James Sullivan reached out and grabbed the card. He looked at the embossed silver logo. He looked at the Vance maiden name I'd used as my middle name on the card. James's face went from confused to gray. "Harrison," James said, his voice trembling with a sudden, terrifying realization. This isn't a fake." "Of course it is." Harrison barked, still chuckling. She probably printed them at Staples this morning. Avery, tell him. Tell him you're just trolling us. I looked my father dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't falter. I didn't go to Staples, Dad, I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence of the restaurant. I went to MIT, and then I went to work. While you were bragging about Julian's surgery, the one that got him suspended 6 months ago, I was securing your firm's future, but I think I've seen enough data tonight. Julian's fork hit his plate with a clang. He looked like he was about to throw up. Suspended? Chloe gasped. Julian, what is she yapping about? Harrison's face was now a deep, unhealthy shade of purple. Avery, shut up. You're making a scene. James, I apologize. My daughter is obviously having some kind of mental breakdown. Harrison, shut up, James Sullivan whispered. James stood up, his eyes locked on mine. Ms. Vance? Ms. Sterling? It's Avery, I said, standing up and smoothing my dress. And James, you should check your email. My general counsel, Margaret Chin, just sent over a formal termination of services notice. As of 8:47 p.m. tonight, Sterling and Vance is no longer the legal representation for Aegis Shield. I looked at the clock on the wall. 8:48 p.m. The Forbes article just went live too, I added, looking at Chloe. You might want to check your feed, sis. I'm the cover girl this month. I picked up my clutch. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at the 4 people who had spent my entire life trying to make me small. Happy birthday to me, I said. Then I walked out of the restaurant, leaving the Sterling legacy to crumble into the dust of their own arrogance. Behind me, I could hear the shouting starting, but I was already in the parking lot, the cool Arizona night air feeling like the finest victory I'd ever tasted. The silence in my penthouse that night was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a successful system reboot. After walking out of Morton's Steakhouse, I didn't head to a bar to celebrate. I didn't cry. I sat in my darkened office watching the Scottsdale skyline, the blue light of my monitors reflecting in my eyes. My phone was a war zone of notifications. Harrison Sterling, 12 missed calls. Eleanor Sterling, 8 missed calls. James Sullivan, 15 texts. Avery, please, we need to talk. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding. I ignored them all. In the world of cybersecurity, when a system is compromised, you don't argue with the virus. You isolate it, you run a diagnostic, and then you delete it. Monday morning, 8 a.m. The Aegis Shield headquarters felt different. Usually, it was a hive of quiet innovation. Today, it felt like a command center. I walked into the war room where Margaret Chin was already waiting. She looked like she hadn't slept, but her eyes were sharp. The ethical risk audit is complete, Avery, Margaret said, sliding a thick, encrypted tablet across the glass table. And honestly, it's straight up criminal. Your father wasn't just being a jerk at dinner. He's been using Aegis Shield's confidential IP filings to tip off a real estate investment group in Sedona. It's textbook insider trading. I leaned back, a cold chill running down my spine. He betrayed his biggest client to save his own clout? Exactly, Margaret nodded. He was drowning. Sterling and Vance has been cooking the books for 18 months. They were using our retainer fees to pay off the interest on Harrison's failed personal loans. If this goes to the Bar Association, he's not just canceled, he's going to federal prison. And Julian? I asked. Margaret pulled up a second file. Worse. Julian didn't leave Mayo Clinic to focus on research. He was forcibly removed. He's been practicing surgery while high as a kite on prescription stimulants. There was a malpractice suit 6 months ago, a hush money settlement that nearly emptied the firm's emergency reserves. That's why your father was so desperate for the Aegis contract. You were literally his life support, and he didn't even know it. He thought I was mid, I whispered, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Meanwhile, his golden boy was a liability, and he was a fraud. Talk about a skill issue. 10:30 a.m. My assistant buzzed me. Ms. Vance, your father is in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's a family emergency. Let him wait, I said. 30 minutes. Let him sit in the glass lobby and watch the 140 engineers he thinks are just playing with computers. When I finally allowed Harrison into my office, he looked like a ghost of the man from the night before. His $5,000 suit looked baggy, his skin was sallow, the courtroom lion was now just a scared old man in a glass cage. Avery, he started, his voice cracking. The termination notice. James Sullivan is spiraling. He says, if you don't rescind the ethical audit report, the firm is done. We'll be liquidated by the end of the month. The firm is done, Dad, I said, not looking up from my tablet. The data doesn't lie. You used Aegis Shield's proprietary data for insider trading. That's a hard fail in any business relationship. I was going to put it back, Harrison shouted, slamming his hands on my desk. I just needed a win. Everything was slipping away. The house, the cars, the reputation. I did it for the family, for the Sterling name. No, I stood up, my voice like ice. You did it for your ego. You spent 12 years telling me I was a disappointment because I didn't fit your prestige mold. You mocked my MIT degree. You skipped my graduation to hustle for clients you eventually robbed. You called my business card a Staples fake in front of your boss. And now you want family to save you? That's delusional, Dad. Avery, please, he whimpered. If James reports this, I'll lose my license. I'll lose everything. You already lost the only thing that mattered, I said, walking to the window. You lost my respect. And in this building, respect is the only currency that doesn't depreciate. Security will show you out. 1 p.m. The second wave arrived. Chloe burst into my office, bypassed my assistant, and threw her $4,000 handbag onto my sofa. She was pressed. Her makeup was a mess, and she looked like she'd been crying since breakfast. Avery, you snake, she screamed. Grant just got fired. His bank found out he was shilling for Dad's real estate scams. They're launching an internal investigation. My life is cooked. Do you have any idea what this does to my brand? Your brand? I looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. You're worried about your Instagram followers while your husband is facing a felony charge? It's not just that, Chloe sobbed. The country club suspended our membership. My friends are ghosting me. Why are you being such a villain? Just tell your company to take Dad back. It's just tech, right? Just delete the audit. That's not how the world works, Chloe, I said, walking over to her. You called me low energy. You said I was fumbling the bag. Well, here's the reality check. While you were busy taking thirst traps at the pool, I was the one paying for your lifestyle. Chloe froze. What are you yapping about? I pulled up a spreadsheet on the wall monitor. The Vance Legacy Trust. Look at the payouts. 2021, $50,000 for your influencer startup that failed in 3 months. 2022, $120,000 to cover Grant's margin call when he gambled on meme stocks. 2023, every single one of Mom's European wellness trips. Where do you think that money came from? Chloe stared at the screen, her mouth hanging open. I thought Dad set that up from his investments. Dad hasn't had a successful investment in 5 years, I said. I set that up. Me, the ghost daughter. I used my mid-coding money to make sure you didn't go bankrupt. I protected this family even when you all treated me like the help. But after last night, the Vance Legacy Trust is closed, effective immediately. Chloe's face went pale. Avery, you can't. We have a mortgage. Grant's car lease is... Figure it out, I said. Sell the bags, get a real job, maybe Staples is hiring. 4 p.m. The final visitor was the most painful. Julian didn't storm in. He walked in like a man headed to the gallows. He looked shook. His eyes were sunken and his hands were trembling. Av, he said, sitting down heavily. I saw the news. Mayo Clinic released a statement. I'm done in the medical field. For good. I know, Julian. I saw the toxicology report from the audit. He put his head in his hands. The pressure, man. Dad wouldn't stop pushing. Be the best, Julian. Be the Sterling icon. I started taking the pills just to stay awake for the 36-hour shifts. Then I needed them just to feel normal. I'm a fraud, Ave, just like Dad. I looked at my brother. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. He was the golden boy who had been crushed by the weight of a crown he never asked for. You're not a fraud, Julian, I said, my voice softening. You're just a product of a toxic system. But you stayed silent while they mocked me. You laughed at the Staples card because it made you feel superior for 5 seconds. I know, he whispered. I'm down bad. I don't even know who I am without the white coat. Well, now you have the chance to find out, I said. But you're going to do it on your own. No Sterling money, no legacy safety net. Go to Sedona. Go to real rehab. not the wellness spa Dad paid for. If you stay clean for a year, maybe we'll talk. But for now, you're on your own. By the end of December 2025, the Sterling and Vance firm had officially dissolved. James Sullivan cut ties entirely to save his own skin, leaving Harrison to face a barrage of lawsuits and a disgraced retirement. My mother called me on Christmas Eve, her voice shrill with desperation. "Avery, please, we had to sell the Scottsdale house. We're moving into a condo in Glendale. It's so small, honey. Your father hasn't left the bedroom in a week. He says he's unsubscribed from life. Please, can't you just use your tech magic to make this go away?" I stood on my balcony, looking at the city lights. "I already used my magic, Mom," I said. "I made the truth visible. The Sterling family needed a system restore, and I'm the only one who had the admin rights to do it. Merry Christmas." I hung up. The data was clear. The Sterling legacy was a corrupted file, and I had finally moved it to the trash. January 2026 arrived in Scottsdale with a cold, dry wind that swept through the empty hallways of the Sterling estate. The sold sign in the front yard was the only piece of legacy left. I stood in the driveway watching as two movers hauled a velvet sofa, the one Harrison had bought to impress a Supreme Court justice, into the back of a beat-up truck. My father stood by the curb, clutching a cardboard box filled with old law journals. He looked small. Not just physically, but spiritually. The $5,000 Brioni suits were gone, replaced by a fleece jacket from a discount mall. "Avery," Harrison said, his voice barely audible over the sound of the truck's engine. "I didn't think you'd show up for the move." "I'm the CTO of a cybersecurity firm, Dad," I said, leaning against my car. "I know how to manage transitions. Where are the keys to the Glendale condo?" "In the pocket of my new reality," he muttered, a ghost of a smile appearing on his face. The drive to Glendale was a 30-minute descent from the clouds. We left the gated communities and the infinity pools behind, entering a world of stucco apartment complexes and strip malls anchored by discount tire shops. It was mid-tier reality. It was standard definition life. What Harrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that he wasn't in prison because of me. 3 weeks ago, in the sterile, white-walled boardroom of Aegis Shield, I had sat across from James Sullivan. James was shook. He knew that if I released the full audit to the federal authorities, Sterling and Vance wouldn't just dissolve. It would be scorched earth. "I'll sign the NDA, Avery," James had whispered, his hands trembling as he looked at the evidence of Harrison's insider trading. "I'll liquidate his shares. I'll make sure he never practices corporate law again. Just don't send this to the SEC. It will kill the firm's reputation for a century." "I don't care about the firm," I had replied, my voice like dry ice. "I care about system integrity. I'll bury the report on one condition. You personally oversee the transition of every single pro bono case Harrison was ignoring to a new legal aid clinic, and you tell him he's retired due to health reasons. If he ever tries to touch a Fortune 500 contract again, the file goes to the FBI. Clear?" "Clear," James had said. I wasn't saving my father because I loved him. I was saving him because a Sterling in a jumpsuit was bad data for my brand. I was cleaning the cash. The condo was a 1,200 square foot box with beige carpet and landlord special white paint. Eleanor was standing in the middle of the living room staring at a stack of boxes as if they were alien artifacts. "Avery, honey," she said, her voice shrill with a controlled panic. "The Wi-Fi, it's only 300 megabits per second. How are we supposed to live like this? And the kitchen, it only has one oven. How am I supposed to host the bridge club?" "Mom, you don't have a bridge club anymore," I said, opening a box of kitchen supplies. "Most of those women unfollowed you the day the Forbes article dropped. You're deplatformed in Scottsdale. Focus on the standard microwave. It's actually pretty intuitive." Eleanor sank onto a packing crate. "It's so basic, Avery. Everything is so common. Your father is going to a job interview at a legal aid clinic tomorrow. He has to take the bus because we had to sell the S-Class to cover the unforeseen expenses Grant caused." "It's called a career pivot, Mom," I said. "He's going from predatory law to actual law. It's a buff to his character, if he plays it right." I spent the rest of the afternoon assembling flat pack furniture. The woman who designed encryption protocols for the Department of Defense was now swearing at an Allen wrench while trying to put together a bookshelf for a disgraced lawyer. It was high-key ironic. While I was hauling boxes, my sister Chloe was facing her own zero-day event. I checked my phone during a break. Chloe's Instagram, once a curated masterpiece of luxury aesthetic and quiet wealth, was a disaster zone. The comments were savage. At Scottsdale, Queen. Wait, so your husband was shilling for your dad's scams? Yikes. Hashtag canceled. At TechGirl99. Imagine calling Avery mid when she literally owns your mortgage. The irony is sending me. Chloe had lost 20,000 followers in 48 hours. Her sponsors, the luxury skincare brands and the overpriced wellness waters, had sent termination of contract emails faster than a server crash. But then, something unscripted happened. Chloe posted a video. No filters. No makeup. She was sitting on the floor of her new cramped apartment in Tempe, surrounded by Target brand moving boxes. "Hey guys," she said, her voice shaky but real. So, the Sterling legacy was a lie. My husband Grant is currently unsubscribed from the banking world, and I'm currently broke. I spent 5 years being fake and mocking the only person in my family who actually had her code together. This isn't a flex, this is a system reset. And I'm starting a new series, living on $40 a week. Catch you in the comments. The video blew up, 100,000 views in 3 hours. For the first time in her life, Chloe wasn't clout chasing. She was rendering the truth. It was her first step toward optimized living. In Oregon, the rain didn't stop. Julian was sitting in a circle of 10 men in a drafty community center. There were no Mayo Clinic badges here. No one cared that he was a Sterling. And to the men in this room, he was just Jay, a guy who traded his surgical mask for a bottle of Adderall and a God complex. "My name is Julian," he said, his voice raspy. "And I'm a fraud." "Hey, Julian," the group droned back. "I spent my whole life being a golden boy because I was terrified of being Avery," he continued. "My sister. She was the only one who saw the bugs in my system. She tried to tell me. She tried to show me her work. And I laughed at her because it made me feel elite. Now she's the one paying for this rehab, anonymously, of course, and I'm the one who can't even hold a scalpel without my hands shaking. I'm down bad, guys, but for the first time, I think I'm synced with reality." Julian found a letter in his locker that evening. It was a printout of a bank transfer for his next 6 months of treatment. At the bottom, there was no name, just a single line of Python code. Julian sat on his bunk and wept. He knew the admin who had sent that. He knew the woman who was hosting his recovery while he was offline. Back in my penthouse, I sat in the dark. The revenge was over. The Sterling family had been reformatted. I looked at the Forbes 30 under 30 trophy on my desk. It felt hollow. I had won, but the multiplayer mode of my life was empty. I had spent so long being a ghost to protect myself that I'd forgotten how to be a user. My phone buzzed. A text from Harrison. Harrison. "Avery, I had my first day at the legal aid clinic. I helped a single mother fight an illegal eviction. She didn't know who I was. She just called me the lawyer who helped. It was based. Did I use that right? Hope you're well. Dad." I looked at the screen and felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation in my chest. It wasn't logic, and it wasn't data. It was connectivity. I started typing back. "Avery, you used it right, Dad. System looks stable. Dinner next Sunday at my place? I'll order the premium takeout." Ave. I hit send. The silent architect was finally starting to build a bridge. Not for legacy, not for prestige, but for V2.0. February 2026 in Mesa, Arizona, felt like a glitch. The dry heat was already creeping back, shimmering over the cracked asphalt of the legal aid clinic parking lot. Harrison Sterling sat in a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. For 30 years, Harrison's user interface was polished mahogany and gold-leafed law books. Now, his desk was a standard issue laminate mess, and his client was Maria, a single mother of 2 whose landlord was trying to force quit her lease to make room for luxury condos. "Mr. Sterling," Maria whispered, clutching a crumpled eviction notice. They said I violated the noise ordinance because my baby cries at night, but I know they just want to triple the rent for the tech workers moving into the district. Harrison looked at the document. A year ago, he would have called this a low-stakes nuisance. He would have billed $500 an hour to make it go away for the landlord. But as he looked at Maria, he saw the same despair he'd felt when James Sullivan told him he was canceled. "Maria," Harrison said, his voice regaining that sharp, authoritative edge, but this time it was optimized for justice. "Your landlord is gaslighting you. This ordinance doesn't apply to infant care. They think you're low energy and won't fight back. They're about to find out they have a bug in their plan." He picked up a cheap plastic phone. He didn't call a senior partner. He called the city inspector. "This is Harrison Sterling," he said, "and I'm hard launching an investigation into the building's plumbing code violations before we even talk about the eviction. Do you want to update your stance, or should we go to a hearing?" It was his first win for someone who couldn't pay him. It was a small-scale victory, but to Harrison, it felt like a system-wide patch. While Harrison was finding his soul, Grant, Chloe's husband, was losing his mind. The audit I'd run hadn't just hit Harrison. It had pinged the compliance department at Grant's investment bank. They'd found the backdoor entries where Grant had moved capital to support Harrison's failing real estate bets. I met Grant in a mid-tier coffee shop in Tempe. He looked roughed up, unshaven, wearing a hoodie to hide his face, and tapping his fingers nervously on a paper cup. "Avery," he hissed, looking around. "The feds. They're asking about the Vance Legacy Trust. They think I was laundering money. You have to tell them it was yours. You have to white hat me, Ave." "I didn't white hat you, Grant," I said, leaning back. "I sandboxed you. I gave you enough rope to show your true code, and you chose to be a shill. You didn't just help Harrison, you skimmed off the top to pay for Chloe's Birkin bags." "I did it for her," Grant shouted, drawing looks from the college students at the next table. "She wanted the influencer life. I was just scaling our lifestyle." "You were overclocking your ethics, Grant," I replied cold-bloodedly. "I've already sent the data logs to your legal counsel. I won't lie for you. But I've arranged for a plea deal if you testify against the real estate scammers who tricked Harrison. It's a character reset. Take it or go offline for 10 to 15 years. Grant slumped into his chair. He was cooked. The man who had mocked my nerd speak was now begging for a software update on his freedom. That evening, I checked my feed. Chloe was live. She wasn't in front of a ring light. She was in a self-service laundromat holding her phone while a dryer tumbled in the background. She had 40,000 people watching, more than she'd ever had when she was fake. "So guys," Chloe said to the camera, "a lot of you are asking why I'm at a laundromat. And the truth is, my luxury life was a trial version that expired. My husband is facing legal patches, and my family is rebooting. I used to think my sister Avery was mid because she worked in tech. I was delusional. She's actually the admin of our entire lives." The comments were a glitchy mix of L's and W's, but for the first time, Chloe didn't delete the negative ones. "I'm done with the filters," she continued. "From now on, this channel is about authentic rendering. No more clout chasing, just the raw code." I sent her a super chat donation of $500 with a simple note. "Nice uptime, sis. Keep the throughput high." I saw her eyes widen as she read it on screen. She didn't cry. She just nodded at the camera. "Thanks, admin. I'm syncing as fast as I can." I sat in my office at Aegis Shield. The company was thriving. We just secured a Series D valuation of $1.5 billion. I was on the cover of Wired. I was a tech deity. But as I looked at the Sterling Legacy folder on my desktop, I felt a memory leak. I had winning data, but losing emotions. I had dismantled my family to save them, but in doing so, I'd become the very thing Harrison was, a controller. I opened a secure terminal and typed a command I'd been hesitating on for months. access_file, Sterling_family_video_archive_2014. A grainy video played. It was my graduation from MIT. I was standing alone, looking at the crowd, searching for a face that wasn't there. Then the camera panned. I saw younger Julian standing in the shadows of the auditorium, far away from our parents. He was holding a small tech magazine with my face on a tiny corner of the emerging talent page. He wasn't laughing. He was smiling. Julian hadn't just ignored me. He'd been shadow logging my career for a decade. He'd been the one who anonymously tipped off the MIT Alumni Fund to give me my first research grant when Harrison refused to pay the tuition surcharge. Julian had been masking his pride to survive Harrison's firewall. I felt a system crash in my heart. All this time, I thought I was the only ghost, but Julian had been a proxy for me. I picked up the phone. I didn't call my lawyer. I called the Oregon Rehab Center. "This is Avery Sterling," I said, my voice buffering with emotion. "Put me through to patient J. Tell him the source code is verified. I know what he did in 2014. It was late February 2026. The epilogue was approaching. I invited the whole family, minus Grant, who was busy with his legal patch, to my penthouse for a final audit. Harrison arrived first, wearing a Goodwill blazer and carrying a box of Thai food. He looked at my high-end security system and just chuckled. "Nice firewall, Ave. Does it catch boomers too?" "Only the toxic ones, Dad," I smiled. Eleanor arrived next carrying a standard bottle of wine. It's not a vintage, Avery, but the user reviews were 4.8 stars. Then the door opened and Julian walked in. He looked clean. His hands were steady. He looked at me, and for the first time in 12 years, we didn't need encryption. "Av," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm back online." "Welcome home, Julian," I whispered. We sat around the table, the silent architect, the humbled lion, the de-influenced influencer, and the rebooted doctor. "So," Harrison said, opening a container of pad thai, "Avery, the news says Aegis Shield is scaling to Europe. Do you need a legal consultant who specializes in tenant rights and pro bono ethics? I hear his salary requirements are very low-key." I looked at my father. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking for a collaborative project. "I'll run a beta test on you, Dad," I said, raising my glass. "But the admin rights stay with me." "Copy that," Harrison laughed. We clinked glasses. The Sterling legacy wasn't a billion-dollar firm anymore. It wasn't a prestige brand. It was just 4 people, rendering a new life, one frame at a time. The data was final. The bug had been fixed. March 2026. Manhattan, New York. The blue light from the floor-to-ceiling monitors was the only thing illuminating my penthouse office on the 54th floor. Outside, the jagged silhouette of the New York City skyline pierced the night, but inside, I was staring at a different kind of landscape, the pre-market data for the Aegis Shield initial public offering, IPO. In 48 hours, the silent architect would no longer be silent. On paper, I was about to become one of the wealthiest women in tech under 35. My net worth was projected to moon. The financial media was calling me the ghost titan, the woman who built a digital fortress while the rest of the world was playing with apps. I was at the peak of the system, but as I sat there, the silence of the office felt heavy. My internal memory was nearly full of the ghosts of Scottsdale. A soft chime signaled the door. Margaret Chin, my general counsel, stepped in. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished concrete floor, a sound of pure corporate authority. She looked at me, her face a mask of professional concern. "Avery? The Wall Street Journal is running a secondary piece tomorrow," Margaret said, sliding an encrypted tablet across my mahogany desk. "They've found a memory leak in your grandmother's maiden name filings from 2018. They've connected Avery Vance to Avery Sterling, and they know about Harrison." I didn't turn away from the window. I watched a tiny yellow taxi crawl through the canyon of Broadway far below. "Let them leak it, Margaret. Data wants to be free, doesn't it?" "Avery, this is high-risk behavior." Margaret's voice rose an octave. "The market is a volatile beast. They want the self-made Avery Vance, the MIT prodigy who came from nothing. They don't want the legacy baggage of a disgraced Scottsdale attorney who's currently fighting eviction cases in a strip mall clinic. The PR team is recommending a system lock, a full denial, and a strategic distraction using the new European expansion news." "Denial is corrupted code, Margaret," I said, finally turning my chair. The light from the monitors caught the sharp edge of my jaw. I spent 12 years hiding in the shadows because Harrison thought my passion was a hobby. He called my business card a Staples fake in front of James Sullivan. "I'm done being anonymous. I'm not just launching an IPO, I'm hard launching the truth. If the stock dips because of who my father is, then the investors don't deserve my encryption. While I was debating billion-dollar valuations in Manhattan, Harrison Sterling was standing in a sterile, white-walled courtroom in Mesa, Arizona. The air conditioning hummed with a depressive drone, and the smell of industrial floor wax was stifling. Harrison wasn't wearing a $5,000 Brioni suit. He was wearing a navy blazer he'd bought at a Goodwill and a tie Eleanor had found in a moving box. He sat at a scratched wooden table next to Maria, a single mother who was trembling so hard her teeth were nearly chattering. Opposing them was a shill lawyer from a major real estate corporation, a man named Bradley who looked exactly like Harrison had 5 years ago, smug, smelling of expensive cologne, and possessing a massive god complex. "Your Honor," Bradley smirked, leaning back as if he owned the room. "Mr. Sterling is clearly out of his depth here. This is a standard for-cause eviction. My client is simply optimizing their property value by removing tenants who violate noise ordinances. It's just business." Harrison stood up. He didn't have a paralegal to hand him files. He didn't have a leather-bound briefcase. He just leaned on the table with his knuckles, looking the judge straight in the eye. "Your Honor!" Harrison's voice boomed. The old courtroom lion was back, but his firmware had been updated with something Harrison Sterling never used to have: empathy. Opposing counsel talks about optimization. And in my old life, I would have used that same word to ruin a family's life. But in the real world, we call this predatory coding. I have personally audited the Mesa City statutes. The noise ordinance they are citing is based on a broken link, a repealed 1998 code that hasn't been enforceable in a decade. My opponent is hallucinating his legal grounds. The courtroom went dead silent. Harrison pulled out an Aegis Shield Pro tablet, a device I had personally encrypted for him. He swiped through a series of telemetry logs. I have logged every illegal entry the landlord made into Maria's apartment using her smart lock data, Harrison continued, his voice steady and lethal. I've mapped the data points of harassment. We aren't just asking for the eviction to be dropped, we're hard-coding a countersuit for civil rights violations. We are hard-launching justice for the residents of this complex. Bradley looked shook. He stared at the tablet, then at Harrison. "Where did you get that encrypted telemetry?" "From the CTO of the most powerful security firm in the country." Harrison smiled, a look of pure, unfiltered pride on his face. "She's my daughter, and she taught me that you can't hide bad code forever." Harrison won the case in 20 minutes. In the hallway, Maria sobbed as she thanked him. Harrison didn't check his watch to calculate billable hours. He just patted her hand and said, "It was a solid patch, Maria. Go home and hug your kids." In a cramped apartment in Tempe, Chloe Sterling was preparing for her most important broadcast yet. There was no ring light, no professional makeup artist. She was sitting at a standard IKEA desk, her hair tied back in a messy bun. In the background, Grant was folding laundry. Grant, the former high-flying banker, was now working as a junior accountant for a nonprofit and doing 500 hours of community service. He was low tier, but for the first time, he looked clean. "Hey, everyone," Chloe said to her 500,000 subscribers, a base that had shifted from clout chasers to people who actually valued her real talk journey. "So, the news is out. The WSJ just hit the send button. Avery Vance is Avery Sterling. The trolls are already leaking into my comments, calling my sister the daughter of a fraud. They're trying to cancel her before the IPO." And she leaned into the lens, her expression fierce. "Listen to me," she said. "I spent my whole life making my sister feel like a background character because I was obsessed with a luxury aesthetic that wasn't even real. Well, tomorrow I'm hard resetting this channel's legacy. My sister is the admin of our entire lives. If she could build a billion-dollar empire from the trash and the hate we gave her, then she's goated. And anyone who wants to unsubscribe because of our family's past, go ahead. We're syncing with the truth now." Grant walked over and squeezed her shoulder. "She's the admin, Chloe. We're just beta testers in her world now, and honestly, it's a much better version of life." 8 a.m. The New York Stock Exchange. The lights were blinding. The cameras were 8K high def. I could see my own reflection in the lens, a woman who no longer needed to hide behind a grandmother's name. I sat across from the lead financial anchor. The ticker tape at the bottom of the screen was glitchy with uncertainty. Aegis Shield was the most anticipated IPO of the decade, but the Sterling scandal was the only thing anyone was talking about. Avery Vance, the anchor started, her gaze piercing. Or should I say, Avery Sterling? There are reports that your father is the disgraced Harrison Sterling. Some are calling your self-made narrative a fake, a systemic lie to distance yourself from your family's crimes. How do you respond to the haters who say you're just another Sterling scammer? I didn't buffer. I didn't look at my notes. I looked directly into the camera, speaking to Harrison in Mesa, Julian in Oregon, and Chloe in Tempe. My name is Avery Sterling, I said, my voice echoing in the hallowed halls of the NYSE. And the self-made narrative is a half-truth. I built Aegis Shield with my own code and my own sweat, but I was formed in the fire of a family that refused to see me. For 12 years, my father dismissed me as mid. He told me I was delusional for thinking a woman could lead a tech revolution. He called my business card a Staples fake while I was literally securing his firm's servers. The studio went dead silent. I didn't come from old money, I continued, watching the stock ticker pause its dip. I came from old ego. And today, as Aegis Shield goes public, I'm not just launching a stock. I'm hard launching a new standard for family accountability. My father is a legal aid volunteer. My brother is a recovering addict. My sister is an advocate for authenticity. We are a corrupted file that has been reconstructed. If the market doesn't like the truth, then the market can unsubscribe from my company. I'm the admin, and this system is finally secure. For 10 seconds, the stock price dipped. It was a red wedding on the charts. Harrison held his breath. Julian gripped his coffee mug. Then the volume spiked. The retail investors, the Gen Z and millennial traders who hated prestige but loved raw data, hit the buy button in a frenzy. The stock didn't just recover, it went parabolic. Avery Sterling, the anchor whispered, checking her earpiece in shock. You just added $600 million to the valuation in 3 minutes. You're the face of the new transparent economy. I'm not a face, I said, standing up and unclipping my mic. I'm the admin, and we are officially live. February 2026. Glendale, Arizona. The sky over Arizona was a deep electric indigo, the kind of rendering you only see when the desert heat finally gives way to a cool winter evening. I pulled my electric SUV, no longer the undercover model, but a high-performance Aegis edition, into the driveway of a modest 2-bedroom condo. There were no iron gates, no security guards in $2,000 suits, just a mid-tier neighborhood where the neighbors actually knew each other's names. I stepped out, carrying a bag of premium takeout and a vintage bottle of wine that I knew Eleanor would actually appreciate now. As I walked toward the backyard, I heard a sound that used to be a glitch in my memory, but was now a steady stream. Laughter. Harrison Sterling was standing at a charcoal grill. He wasn't wearing Bryony. He was wearing an apron that said Legal Aid Legend, a gag gift from his new coworkers, and he was currently swearing at a burger patty. This hardware is completely unstable, Avery, Harrison shouted, waving a spatula as I walked in. The thermal protocol on this grill is all over the place. I think the charcoal is lagging. I laughed, a real, unfiltered laugh that felt goated in my chest. It's not lagging, Dad. You just have to update the airflow manually. Open the vent. Copy that, he winked, adjusting the vent with a practiced flick of his wrist. Harrison looked healthier. He'd lost the corporate bloat. His skin was tan from walking to the courthouse, and his eyes were clear. He was no longer a lion looking for a kill. He was a man who had found his source code. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see Julian. He had arrived from Oregon that morning. He looked snatched, lean, muscular from chopping wood at the rehab center, and possessing a clarity I hadn't seen in him since we were kids. He wasn't wearing scrubs. He was wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans. Av, he said, pulling me into a hug that didn't feel performative. It felt synced. How's the uptime in Oregon, Julian? I asked, pulling back. 6 months clean, Ave, he said, his voice steady. No pills, no God complex, just me. I've started volunteering at a clinic for at-risk youth in Portland. They don't care that I was a star surgeon. They just care that I can patch a scraped knee without glitching. It's low-key the best work I've ever done. I knew you could reboot, Julian, I whispered. I couldn't have done it without the admin watching my back, he replied, nodding toward the Vance Legacy Trust documents he'd finally processed. I know it was you, Ava, the anonymous support. The firewall you built around my reputation while I was offline. Thanks for not letting me delete myself. In the corner of the patio, Chloe was setting the table. She wasn't checking her engagement metrics. She wasn't taking a selfie with the salad. She was laughing with Eleanor about a failed DIY project they'd attempted earlier that day. Grant was there too, sitting on a lawn chair, looking at a junior accounting manual. He had finished his first 200 hours of community service. He was low tier in the banking world now, but he was hard-coding a new life. He looked at me and gave a small, respectful nod, a user acknowledging a super admin. Hey, cover girl, Chloe shouted, running over to hug me. I saw the Forbes follow-up. Avery Sterling, the woman who saved her family from themselves. The comments are straight up obsessed with you. I'm deplatforming from the media for a while, Chloe, I smiled. I've had enough cloud storage for 1 year. I feel that, Chloe said, grabbing a plate. My authentic channel just hit 1 million subs today. No filters, no fake flex, just me talking about how cringe I was for 30 years. People love the raw data, Ave. They really do. We sat down at the table, the same Staples desk I had assembled for Harrison months ago, now repurposed as our family dining table. Eleanor raised her glass. She looked elegant, but in a standard definition way. She wasn't wearing $50,000 in diamonds. She was wearing a simple silver locket I'd given her for Christmas. To Avery, Eleanor said, her voice buffering with emotion. For 12 numb, I was blind to the light you were shining. I thought you were invisible because I didn't know how to read your brilliance. Thank you for updating our hearts. Harrison raised his plastic cup of lemonade. To the Chief Technology Officer, the only Sterling who actually knew how to scale love. You hard-launched a new family, Avery, and the throughput is incredible. We clinked glasses. No prestige, no legacy, no Staples insults, just connectivity. As the dinner went on, I looked at each of them. Harrison, the lion turned lamb who fought for the low-energy tenants of Mesa. Eleanor, the socialite turned mother who finally knew how to use a microwave and a heart. Julian, the golden boy turned human who was finding his value in service, not status. Chloe and Grant, the influencers turned individuals who were finally rendering a real life. I realized then that my project was complete. I didn't need to ghost them anymore. I didn't need to encrypt my feelings. The firewall I'd built to protect myself for 12 years had finally been decommissioned. I leaned back, watching the stars render perfectly over the Arizona desert. I pulled out my phone one last time and opened the Sterling_family_project folder on my secure drive. I typed the final command. I hit enter and tucked the phone away. Hey, Dad, I said, reaching for a burger. Tell me more about that city council case. I think I have a script that can help you audit their public records. Harrison grinned, his eyes sparkling with high-resolution joy. Now you're talking, mija. Let's optimize this town together. The silent architect was no longer silent. The ghost was finally home. The legacy was finally real. System status, optimal. Connection, secure. Uptime, 100%. Log off. March 2026. A young girl, maybe 17, is sitting in the MIT library. She's wearing a hoodie and staring intensely at a screen filled with complex cybersecurity code. She stops, sighs, and looks at a framed Staples business card on her desk. Beneath the card, a small silver plaque reads, "Never let anyone tell you your code is just a hobby. Avery Sterling, CTO." The girl smiles, cracks her knuckles, and hits enter. The screen flashes. Access granted.